Application for recognition under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Entrepreneur's Toolbox by Dexter Robinson, Entrepreneurship 630. We'll start by addressing what is a 501c3. 501c3 is a tax-exempt status for nonprofits approved by the federal government. However, individual states are responsible for approving a business to be recognized as a nonprofit. The waiting period for approval of a 501c3 status can range from 3 months to 24 months. State links for exempt organizations can be found on the IRS's website, irs.gov. There are several types of purposes that can be considered for nonprofits. There's charitable, religious, educational, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, and preventing cruelty to children or animals. Charitable is a broad term, and the IRS provides direction on how the term should be used. The term charitable is used in its generally accepted legal sense and includes relief of the poor, the distressed, or the underprivileged, advancement of religion, advancement of education or science, erecting or maintaining public buildings, monuments, or works, lessening the burdens of government, lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, and combating community deterioration and juvenile delinquency. Prior to filing for your 501c3 tax-exempt status, there are a few things that you should consider. The first is to identify if the organization will be a trust, corporation, or association. The second is to establish and collect the organization's documents. The third is to identify the state's organization requirements for where the organization resides. And the final step is to acquire an employer identification number, more commonly known as an EIN. There are a few things that you should consider in order to qualify for a tax-exempt status. One of which is that you may not influence legislation as a substantial part of your activities. The second is that you may not participate in campaigns for or against political candidates. And lastly, to maintain a 501c3 tax-exempt status, organizations are restricted on the amount of political and lobbying activities they can conduct. The first step is to determine the organizational structure. There are three different types of organizational structures that can be used: a trust, a corporation, or an association, all of which are defined by state law. A trust is generally when one individual owns the title to property and is required to retain or use the property for a defined beneficiary or person. A corporation must file articles of incorporation with the state that it resides in. In their articles, there must also be content referencing the purpose and intent of the corporation and how it aligns with the 501c3 code. For an association, articles of association must be filed with the state that the organization resides in, as well as there must be content referencing the intent of the association, as well as how it aligns with the 501c3 code. Now that we have a better understanding of the organizing structures used to create a nonprofit and qualify for the 501c3 tax-exempt status, it's important to collect the organization's documents. It is also known that each state may have varying organizing documents required in order to meet the nonprofit status for the state that your business or corporation resides in. For an example, we've used the state of North Carolina to understand how to establish a nonprofit. The first step is to file articles of incorporation with the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State. Guidelines on how to incorporate the business can be found at sosnc.gov/corporations. Step 2 is to create organizational bylaws and have them approved by the Board of Directors. Step 3 would be to apply for a federal employer identification number, or commonly known as an EIN. And step 4 would be to apply for a 501c3 nonprofit status using Form 1023 with the Internal Revenue Service, more commonly referred to as the IRS. It is important to note in the state of North Carolina, once you are approved for your 501c3 tax-exempt status, you should apply with the North Carolina Department of Revenue for approval for exemption from state corporate income tax and franchise tax. The final step prior to applying for your 501c3 tax-exempt status is to apply for a Federal Employer Identification Number, more commonly known as the EIN. You can apply for the EIN via online, phone, fax, or mail. If applying by mail, it's important to use the IRS form SS-4. When applying online, it's important to note that the application must be completed in one session and you will not be able to save or return at a later time to access your information. Your session will also expire after 15 minutes of inactivity and you will need to start over. Only legally formed organizations should apply for their EIN. Once you have completed the steps previously mentioned, you are finally ready to file for your 501c3 tax exemption status. The appropriate form to use is the Form 1023 with the Internal Revenue Service. It's important to note that some organizations may be eligible to file a 1023 EZ form. You should complete the eligibility worksheet available on the IRS's website to determine if you or your organization is eligible. Once you have been approved for your 501c3 tax-exempt status, there are a number of benefits that will help your organization. Earned income is exempt from federal income tax. Donations to the organization are now tax deductible. You may be eligible for public and private grants, and numerous discounts on other goods and services may be available to you.